Thank you for that generous introduction. So, my name is Deo Ngonyani, and I often prefer to be called Mwalimu Deo Ngonyani rather than professor or anything. Mwalimu is the Swahili word for teacher. I find it more prestigious for a Swahili speaker and teacher to be called teacher, which is a much more common term than professor. I'm going to talk about just one particular issue in languages. It comes from a bunch of anecdotes, but a very typical one was in 1999 when I moved to Lansing. We were invited to a gathering of Tanzanians so that I could be introduced to Tanzanians who live around here. At that gathering, we met a couple who had brought their daughter, a teenage daughter of 15 years or so, who they had brought 2 years before. So, knowing that probably 98% of people in Tanzania speak Swahili, we spoke to the girl also in Swahili. But she responded to us in English and always glancing at her parents nervously. We finally found out from her parents and other people that the parents had forbidden her from speaking Swahili because that would hinder her progress in learning English. So that's my starting point. There are many families and many people from Africa who are worried about their children learning African languages because those languages would hinder their progress and there would be an obstacle for them in academic achievement. It's just one of examples of challenges of maintaining African identities. Ethnic identity and awareness of who we are, where we come from, is expressed through several things, including such societal features as language, religion, customs. But we also recognize that identities are not fixed, unchanging things. Circumstances may change, as all of us have experienced. And language may not be the most important feature of one's identity at some point. But as a marker of identity, language is very crucial. In Africa, you often find people telling those people, we do not belong to the same community, the same group. Why? Because we don't speak the same language. So language is very important in identifying ourselves. Speaking the same language means that we do share some identity. So I'm assuming that we all want our children to learn from our roots. We want them to pass our memories of Africa. We want them to understand and carry on that information that Africa is not all about Hamad and haze, or all paradise like the spectacular Serengeti Masai Mara migrations, or all hell like war-torn Darfur. We want them to learn about Africa, how Africans view the world. We want them to learn how to relate to one another. We want them to learn how Africans have survived and persevered and how they are thriving today. Even when the media bombards them with images of paradise and hell, we want them to learn ancient African wisdom of, help me here, Umuntu Abantu. People are people through other people. Variously also translated as I am because we are. It is a proverb depicting our collective responsibility. And I believe facing different challenges that we have today, including things like our identity, is one of those things that ensure we understand that we have a shared humanity. We want the children to be curious about Africa, and we want them to respect their elders. So in my remarks today, I want to talk about three things. First, the importance of heritage languages, loosely defined, and how we can strengthen ethnic and cultural identities of Africa. Secondly, I want to dispel the myths and misinformation about language learning and language acquisition, placing heritage languages in the context of acquisition of language and multiple languages. Thirdly, I want us to look at what we can do to help our children learn and maintain African languages. Oh, just some pictures from back from Africa when I was doing research. So I want to consider heritage languages, also sometimes known as community languages, as simply languages that are spoken by non-dominant communities. Some people would call them linguistic minorities. So a heritage learner, what we think of our children as becoming heritage learners, as learners of languages that are not dominant, and that they do have cultural connection with the original homelands of those languages. For example, in the US, English is the dominant language. But there are communities all over, including here, of people speaking different languages. Communities of Wolof speakers, Akan, Hausa, Swahili, Luganda, and so on. Oftentimes, the people who emigrated from Africa speak African languages as their first languages. And the young ones who have grown up in the US may or may not speak the African languages. So we need to remind ourselves that we know that one of the main functions of language is communication. Language is a tool of communication. We use speech, for example, to inform, to impart knowledge, to exchange different kinds of information, to express ourselves, and so on. However, when we speak, we also communicate using language, and we signal different kinds of things. For example, language is often a marker of our identities. The language you speak, even the variety that you speak, sends out signals which tell the listener or anyone who hears you are from a certain background. The language says where you come from. People will relate to you in a particular way because you speak a particular language. We were told it's time for stories, and you must have stories. You must have numerous experiences where language was one of the things that alerted other people that you shared with them a background. So I'll share with you some of the stories. Memorial Weekend 2013, I traveled with my family to Niagara Falls. And as we were going down to the falls, we were speaking very excitedly Swahili, of course, And another family, a group of people, a family of strangers came to us, and they said they also speak Swahili. And so these strangers were originally from East Africa. They now live in Alberta, Canada. There was so much excitement when we met. You could have easily thought that we actually knew each other from before. But it was only our shared language. We told each other about where we came from, what cities we grew up in, what cities are like now, different kinds of things in East Africa. We were all connected to East Africa, and we recognized each other through Swahili. The other family was actually people from Kenya and Tanzania, but they were all of Indian origin. But we shared that one feature, language, and that was an important identity for all of us. There are many such stories too. In '98 in Indiana, I met two young people who spoke very good Swahili, and we became very good friends. But they had never lived in East Africa. They were Arabs from Oman. Their parents had immigrated back to Oman from Zanzibar in the 60s. But they were both very excited to find a Swahili-speaking community in Bloomington, Indiana.
Too many choices.
Swahili helped us to network, to make new friends, because we shared an identity. We understand also that in our new home in the United States, children grow up with limited experience of Africa. They have spent most of their time in the United States. Their experience about Africa may often be limited to their exposure at home. Their friends do not speak African languages. And we know that teenagers have a lot of dependence on their friends rather than family. And so their friends do not speak African languages. Parents, on the other hand, most likely spend most of their formative years in Africa. They care about Africa. They follow developments in Africa. They are often very passionate about traditions, values, and things related to Africa. So you see, we see the world through different prisms. That is, the younger people who have grown up here, and the older folks that migrated from Africa. But remember, the use of language also reveals your ancestry. It reveals your identity. It says you belong somewhere. There is a history that is connected to you. And to some extent, there is always a fear that inability to speak the language of your ancestors shows lack of that essential connection. In Africa, there are many reminders of where you come from, even in your multiple identities. The elders will remind you very often about your roots. This summer, I was back in Tanzania, in southern Tanzania, to visit my parents, and I met one old man. This is very typical. It happens almost every time I go there, because I don't stay for a long time. There is lots of people that I don't get to see often, so I hadn't seen this old man for a long time. And so he goes, "Deo, do you remember me?" And I said, "Oh yeah, you are Mzee Hamis." And he says, "No, who am I to you?" There is always a question about the connection you have to other people. Who am I to you? Now I must admit, he's a very distant relative. I know him, but he's a very distant relative. So I said, "Yeah, well, let's meet him now," because I don't remember the exact connection.
Please welcome the gospel choir group.